Picture a canal. Not one of those clean, well-lit canals you might have seen on a postcard or in a painting. Picture it dark. Picture it brown, maybe black, reflecting nothing but the smear of lamplight from the buildings above. Now, fill it with everything a city of 200,000 people throws away in a day. Fish guts from the herring stalls, rope ends and tar and the oil runoff from 1,000 lamps. The slop buckets emptied from windows at all hours. Human waste, animal waste, and waste you cannot name and would rather not. Add the smell of burning peat cutting through the cold air. The scent of Geneva, that's Dutch gin, seeping from every tavern doorway. Nutmeg from the VOC warehouses, drifting sweet and strange over the entire eastern half of the city, and under all of it, the deep cold smell of the North Sea, which is never quite as far away as you'd like. That's Amsterdam, 1720. The richest city in the world, maybe. Also one of the most dangerous. A place where you could make a fortune on Tuesday and lose everything, including your health, including your freedom, by Thursday. Where sailors arrived from the other side of the world with months of wages and left with nothing. Where young women came from the countryside looking for work and ended up working, just not the work they'd imagined. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists. Not to look at the paintings in the museums or admire the canal houses in the golden light of a history book. We're living it. One night, one young woman, everything she would have smelled, heard, carried, endured, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I have no idea if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just very particular about your bedtime content. Either way, get comfortable. Pull the blanket up. Here we go. Your name is Greet Verhoeven. You're 17 years old. You've been in Amsterdam for 4 months and 3 days. You know the count exactly because you have scratched marks into the back of the wardrobe in the room you share with 2 other girls in the house, on Bloodstraat, Blood Street, because yes, that is the name of the street, and no, it does not feel like a coincidence. You're not a whore. That distinction matters more than almost anything to you right now. You are a mead, a servant girl. You clean. You carry, you haul water up 4 flights of stairs, and you scrub the stone steps outside at 5 in the morning, and you empty the slop jars before anyone else wakes up. You serve the Geneva and the wine and sometimes the hot broth that keeps the women on their feet through the long cold nights. You do not do what the women upstairs do, but you live in the same house, and in Amsterdam in 1720, the line between a maid in a brothel and the women who work the upper floors is thinner than people think. It is made of debt, of obligation, of the small and constant pressure of a woman named Mevrouw Helena, who knows exactly what you owe her, down to the last stuiver, and is never shy about reminding you. This is where we start, not with the scenery, not with the famous canals, with the weight of what you owe. Because everything else, every smell and sound and cold morning and dangerous night, radiates outward from that central fact. You owe Mevrouw Helena 12 guilders and 4 stuvers for the room you sleep in, the food you eat, the clothes on your back when you arrived with nothing, and she gave you a dress and a cap and a pair of shoes that almost fit. You owe this in addition to the work you do every day, which does not count as payment, which counts as earning your place, which is a phrase Mevrouw Helena uses the way other people use breathing, constantly, automatically, without particular emphasis. 12 guilders and 4 stuvers. A skilled craftsman in Amsterdam earns maybe 8 or 9 guilders a week if he's lucky. You earn nothing, technically. What you earn goes toward the debt, At this rate, by your calculations, scratched into the back of that wardrobe next to the tally marks for days, you will be free of it sometime around your 20th birthday. If the debt doesn't grow, it has a way of growing. Your eyes open to darkness. The room is black, genuinely black, with no light at all except for the faint orange thread under the door that means someone has lit the lamp in the corridor. You have maybe half a second where you forget everything, where you are, who you are, what the next 12 hours will look like. Half a second of nothing. Then the smell hits you. Not one smell. Never just one smell in this house. The first thing your nose finds is the tallow candles that burn themselves out sometime in the middle of the night. A thick, slightly rancid animal smell that coats the back of your throat. Then the women. Ruth is asleep an arm's length from you, her breath coming slow and steady, and you can smell the Geneva she drank after her last customer, sweet and sharp and mixed with the particular smell of a body that has been working all night. Lisbeth is already awake somewhere. You can hear her moving in the dark, a small shuffling sound, the creak of the floorboard near the washstand. She smells of camphor and something else you've learned not to identify. And underneath all of that, always underneath, is the canal. Bloodstraat runs along a narrow stretch of water that connects to the Udetidsvoorburgwal, which is one of the main canals through the oldest part of the city. In summer, it is almost unbearable. In January, it is just barely tolerable. The ice on the canal has muffled some of the smell, but not all of it. The cold makes it denser somehow, heavier, like the canal is pressing its smell up through the ice to remind you it's still there. Welcome to Amsterdam in the winter of 1720. You're cold, your feet are cold, your hands, even tucked under the thin blanket, are cold. Your nose is cold. The wash basin, which you can see now as a grey shape in the slightly less dark of the room, contains water that has a thin skin of ice across the top. Lisbeth breaks it with her elbow. "Morgen," she says. "Morning." Her voice is flat and low. She's been here 3 years. Morning stopped meaning anything to her a long time ago. You sit up, pull the blanket around your shoulders for exactly as long as you can get away with it, which is not long. The church bells save you from having to decide when to get up. They ring at 5, and in Amsterdam in 1720, 5 o'clock is not a suggestion. 5 o'clock is the city beginning its machinery, and if you're not already part of that machinery when the gears start turning, you will get ground between them. Not just one church, never just one in Amsterdam. The city is thick with churches, Lutheran and Calvinist and Catholic and Mennonite and Remonstrant and half a dozen flavours of God, all competing for the same cold January sky. The Westerkerk is the loudest. It is 2 streets over, and its bells are the ones that make the windows in this building shiver slightly in their frames. 4 strokes, pause, 1 stroke. 4:45, not 5 yet. You have a few minutes. But Mevrouw Helena gets up at 5. She walks the building at 5 past, checking every room. And if she finds you still in bed when she opens the door, the lecture begins immediately and it does not stop until you've agreed with her 3 times that you are grateful for your situation. You get up. The floor is wooden and cold in a way that goes straight through your stockings which you slept in, and up into your ankles. Lisbeth is at the wash basin, splashing water on her face in the economical way of someone who has learned that lingering makes it worse. Roos doesn't move. Roos doesn't work until evening. Roos is the closest thing to a friend you have in this building, which tells you something about the options available. Your clothes are on the peg behind the door. Plain things. a rough linen undershirt, a grey woolen skirt that someone else wore before you, a bodice of dark brown that buttons down the front, a linen cap that you're required to wear during the day and which marks you immediately as the servant rather than anyone else, an apron, white in theory, which you boil clean on Saturdays along with everything else. The apron has a small burn mark near the hem from when you dropped a candle in October. It doesn't come out. You've stopped trying. Dressed in 2 minutes. Stockings retied, cap pinned, apron on. The mirror by the door, the only mirror in the room, and it's small and spotted with age, shows you a face that looks younger than 17 and also somehow older. You have developed a habit of not looking at it for too long. The stairs in this building creak on the 2nd and 4th step from the bottom, and the landing outside the women's rooms on the 2nd floor has a loose board that sounds like a gunshot if you step on it wrong. You have memorized all of this. You navigate it in the dark without thought, feet finding the safe edges by muscle memory. Mevrouw Helena's rooms are on the ground floor, her bedroom, her sitting room, where she conducts business during the day, her office, which you've been inside exactly twice, and which smells of tobacco and ledger paper, and the lavender she puts in her wardrobe. The kitchen is at the back, past the room where she keeps the supplies, the bottles of Geneva and beer and wine, the foodstuffs, the extra linens. The kitchen is your domain in the mornings. It is small. It smells of old grease and wood smoke and the dried herbs that hang from the ceiling beams. You start the fire. This is the first real work of the day, and it is harder than it sounds. The wood is damp. It's always slightly damp in Amsterdam winters. Everything in this city is slightly damp. The air itself is slightly damp. And the kindling catches on the 3rd try, when you've already used 2 good pieces of flint and said something under your breath that would have alarmed your mother. The fire takes. Grudgingly, with a great deal of grey smoke, it takes. You hold your hands over the first faint warmth, just for a moment, just long enough for the feeling to start coming back into your fingertips. Then you fill the kettle. The water comes from a barrel in the corridor. You filled it yesterday from the pump on Ouderzijds Voorburgwal. 3 trips with 2 buckets each, a quarter of an hour's work in the cold. The kettle is heavy. You hang it on the hook over the fire and it makes a thick sloshing sound. Bread. There's a half loaf left from yesterday, harder than it was but still bread. You cut it, set it on the board, go to find the butter in the cold box in the corner, which is a wooden cabinet with a gap to the outside air that serves as a sort of primitive refrigeration and that occasionally lets in a draught cold enough to see your breath. This is breakfast. Bread and butter and whatever the fire can make of the chicory that Mevrouw Helena buys instead of real coffee, because real coffee costs money she'd rather spend on other things. By the time Mevrouw Helena appears in the kitchen doorway, the bread is laid, the chicory is nearly hot, and you are standing by the fire in a way that could be interpreted as warming your hands or working, depending on who is asking. She looks at the bread. She looks at you. The step outside is not done, she says. It's true. You haven't done the step yet. The front step is supposed to be scrubbed before 6. I'll do it after. You'll do it now. Mevrouw Helena is 53 years old. She's a small woman, barely to your chin, with grey hair always pulled back under a white cap and hands that are always slightly red from cold or work or both. She's been running this house for 22 years. Before that, she ran a different house on Vermeerstraat, which she closed when it became too well known to the burgomeesters for comfort. She was not always a brothel keeper. She does not talk about what she was before. You have pieced together a few facts from things the women say. Late at night when Mevrouw Helena is in her rooms, and the year never has made everyone slightly honest. She had a husband once, a fabric merchant, who died of fever when they'd been married 6 years. She had a daughter who died young. She came to this work because there were not many options for a widow without family in Amsterdam in the early part of this century, and she has been methodical and careful and relentless about it ever since. She's not cruel exactly, she feeds you. She keeps the building reasonably clean. She does not allow certain categories of customer who she has learned over 22 years to identify on sight. She throws them out herself, which is something to see. This small grey woman with the red hands standing in her doorway saying "Weg," go, in a tone that no man has yet found reason to challenge. But she keeps the books in a way that does not favour the girls who owe her, and she does not encourage women to leave, and she does not make leaving easy. And you have been here 4 months, and you understand already that 12 guilders and 4 stuvers is not a number that she will allow to go to 0 without finding some new reason to add to it. The bucket is cold against your palm as you carry it outside. The stone step is slick with ice. January in Amsterdam is serious in a way that January in Utrecht, where you are from, is not. Because in Amsterdam the wind comes off the water with nothing in the way, and it finds every gap in your clothing with a thoroughness that feels personal. You crouch on the step and scrub. The bristles of the brush are stiff from the cold. The stone is grey, rough under the brush, and the water you pour over it steams slightly in the pre-dawn air before the cold takes it. It is still dark. The canal is a black line a few yards away, barely visible. A cat picks its way along the opposite bank, placing its feet carefully over patches of ice. You scrub. Your knuckles hit the stone on the 3rd stroke and the skin breaks and stings. You keep scrubbing. Across the canal a lamp appears in a window. Someone else up early. Some servant girl at another house starting her own morning. You can see her shadow moving behind the glass. Welcome to Amsterdam. By 6 the building is starting to wake up. Not the women. The women who worked last night sleep until noon at least, sometimes later. But Mevrouw Helena is up, moving through the rooms, opening shutters, checking on her house with the focused efficiency of a woman who does not waste daylight. And Jan is up. Jan is the doorman. He sleeps in a small room near the front door, a room not much bigger than a wardrobe, and he is always either asleep or very much awake, with nothing in between. He's a large man, 40 or so, with a broken nose that healed badly and arms that look like they belong to someone twice his size. He is not violent, or not without reason anyway. But he carries the potential for it the way some buildings carry the smell of an old fire. Jan is the thing that makes Mevrouw Helena's house different from some of the other establishments on Bloedstraat, where the women work without any door between them and whatever walks in from the street. Jan is the door between. He decides who comes in. He decides when they leave. He has decided wrong twice in the 22 years he's worked here, and both times ended in breakage. Furniture, not people, though one of those times was close. "Morning," he says, already at his post by the door eating bread. "Morning." Cold. Very cold. This is the full extent of conversation with Jan before 7 o'clock. After 7 he becomes somewhat more verbal, but in the mornings you've learned to work around him in silence, like a piece of furniture that occasionally nods. The house on Bloedstraat is 4 stories, not counting the cellar. The cellar is where the wine is kept, down damp stone steps that you hate using alone after dark. The ground floor is Mevrouw Helena's rooms and the kitchen and the main entrance hall with its polished wood floor and the portrait of a merchant's wife that came with the building and that Mevrouw Helena has never taken down, perhaps because a portrait of a respectable woman on the wall creates a certain impression. The first floor is the receiving room, the salon, which is where the women sit in the evenings when customers come, where the music happens, where the Geneva and wine are poured and the lamps are kept turned high so the light is warm and the shadows are flattering. There are 4 chairs upholstered in red fabric that is starting to show wear along the armrests. There is a small table with the bottles on it. There is a fireplace that you're responsible for laying every afternoon. And there are 2 smaller rooms off the corridor that serve various purposes depending on the time of day. The second floor is where the women's private rooms are. Ruth has the room on the corner, which is slightly larger and has 2 windows. She's been here the longest. The hierarchy of this house is written in room sizes. The third floor is where you sleep, you and Lisbeth, in the room under the eaves with the sloping ceiling and the ice on the wash basin. And the building breathes. It breathes with the damp and the cold and the particular compressed smell of many people living closely together, of tallow and lye soap and Geneva, and things that get washed out and things that don't. You know this building the way you know your own hands. Your first errand of the morning comes at 7:30, when Mevrouw Helena appears in the kitchen and sets 2 things on the table. A list, written in her careful small hand, and a leather purse with exactly enough money in it for the list, and you both know this without counting it. The list says, bread, 2 loaves, from the baker on Newmarket, not the cheaper one on the side street. Candles, 12 tallow, 4 white. Oil, a half flask, the good kind. And rosemary, because Mevrouw Helena has an idea that rosemary burned in the rooms does something for the smell, which is optimistic but not entirely wrong. You put on your cloak, wool, dark blue, one of the better things you own, which means Mevrouw Helena gave it to you and you owe for it. And you wrap a scarf around your neck and you step out into Amsterdam in January, and the city immediately becomes very large and very loud and very cold. Before we go any further, I need you to understand what Amsterdam looks like in 1720, because it explains the room you're standing in, and the bottles you're carrying, and the women sleeping upstairs, and the debt in Mevrouw Helena's ledger. It is one of the most extraordinary places in the world at this moment. Not because of what's coming. It is starting to lose ground to London and Paris. The merchants of Amsterdam are beginning to feel it, though they wouldn't admit it yet. But because of what it is right now, the city is built on water, not near water, on water. The whole thing is an engineering project. Piles driven into the soft mud of the IJ harbour, drainage systems, pumps, the constant labour of keeping a city dry that has no natural right to exist where it does. The canals are the bones of the place. 3 main ones curve in great arcs around the old centre, the Herengracht, the Keizersgracht, the Prinsengracht, and dozens of smaller ones run between them, and the whole city is cross-hatched with bridges so that you're never more than a few steps from water. The buildings crowd the canals. They are tall, 5 and 6 stories, their facades decorated with step gables and neck gables and bell gables in the Dutch fashion, each one slightly different, so that the canal front looks like a row of very proud, very individual people, all trying not to look at each other. The wealthy ones are made of brick and have large windows that catch the pale winter light. The less wealthy ones are made of timber and lean slightly, in the way that Amsterdam buildings lean, as the foundations shift slowly in the mud beneath, and they are crammed together. The streets between the canal houses, the streets you're walking right now, are narrow enough that you can sometimes touch the buildings on both sides with your arms extended. Some of the alleys are not much wider than your shoulders. This sound bounces between walls in a way that makes it hard to know where anything is coming from. It is a city of commerce. Always, constantly, without pause. The Beurs, the stock exchange, was the first in the world to do what it does, which is to turn the future into something you can buy and sell. VOC shares, East India Company shares, speculative instruments that would make your head swim if you understood them. Fortunes are made on the trading floor in an afternoon and lost in a morning. The merchants who built this city built it on spice and sugar, and a calculated willingness to send men to the other side of the world in ships, and not always get them back. It is also a city of tolerance, which is different from a city of virtue. The tolerance is practical. Jews have lived here safely for over a century because they are useful to trade. Catholics practice their faith in churches hidden behind respectable house facades because their money is the same colour as everyone else's, and the women on Bloedstraat and the Zeedijk and the Warmerstraat and the half-dozen other streets where the business of the night happens. They're not exactly legal, not exactly illegal, not exactly ignored. They are managed. They are taxed, in a manner of speaking. They're useful to a port city that needs to absorb 10,000 sailors at a time. You are part of this city's management of what it does not want to think about directly. The Newmarkt is a 5-minute walk from Bloedstraat, and in those 5 minutes you cross 2 bridges and pass a church and 3 taverns, and a house with a distinctive carved anchor above the door. That means it's a rooming house for sailors, and a herring stall that is already open despite the cold. Because in Amsterdam the herring stalls never close, they open when the fish come and stay open until the fish are gone and then open again tomorrow. The smell of the city at this hour is different from the smell at night. Night is Geneva and smoke and the particular warm human smell that comes from too many people in enclosed spaces. Morning is sharper, colder. The canals smell more at this hour. The ice is thinner here. It moves with the tide, and the things trapped under it release as the light comes up. Fish, mud, salt, something decomposing somewhere that you have learned to stop trying to locate. And above it all, if the wind is right, nutmeg. Nutmeg from the VOC warehouses on the Cloveniersburg Wall. That smell, sweet, sharp, slightly medicinal, drifts across half the city some mornings, and it means that a ship has come in and the warehouses are being unloaded. It means trade. It means Amsterdam is still Amsterdam. It means somewhere on the other side of the world, someone grew a nutmeg tree, and that nutmeg travelled in a wooden ship through storms you cannot imagine, and now it is here, 10 minutes' walk from where you're buying bread. The baker on Newmarkt is a wide, pink-faced man named Gerrit. He knows Mevrouw Helena. He knows where you work. He has never once, in 4 months, said anything to you that implied he found this objectionable, which puts him in a different category than perhaps half the people you interact with daily. 2 loaves, you say, the dark. Cold this morning. Very cold. He wraps the bread. It is warm against your hands through the cloth, and you hold it perhaps slightly longer than necessary on the way back out into the street. The Newmarkt itself is the old city gate area, a square dominated by the Wag, which is a medieval tower that used to control entry into the city and is now a weighing house where goods are measured and taxed. It is also, on certain days, where the surgeons of the Surgeons' Guild come with their students to cut open executed criminals and study the insides of human bodies in a room at the top of the tower that you try not to think about when you're buying bread at the market stalls below. The market is setting up. vegetable sellers arranging their crates, a man with a cart of dried fish, women selling hot milk from covered urns, the steam rising in visible clouds in the cold air. You buy the candles from a stall near the north end, cheaper here than the chandler shop. The oil and the rosemary from a spice and sundries seller whose stall smells of a dozen different things at once. Pepper and cloves and the sharp chemical smell of whatever he uses to preserve his dried goods. He has a little boy sitting on the ground behind him, sorting something with cold pink fingers. The boy looks up at you with large dark eyes. You think of your youngest brother, who is 9 and whose name is Peter, and who you have not seen in 4 months and 3 days. You turn back to the transaction. By mid-morning the house is fully awake, which in the context of a place where most of the residents went to sleep at 2 or 3 in the morning means a gradual surfacing. Movement heard through ceilings. Water poured. A cough from someone's room. The sound of Roos's door, and then Roos herself appearing at the top of the first-floor stairs in a dressing gown that was once fine, and is still, technically, fine, though the lace at the cuffs is starting to fray. Roos is 24. She's from Zeeland, the coastal province in the south, and she has the particular complexion of someone who grew up near the sea, a sort of permanent weatheredness that has nothing to do with her current indoor life. She has been at Mevrouw Helena's house for 3 years, which is a long time by the standards of this business, and she has stayed partly because the house is better than the alternative she has investigated, and partly because of a calculation regarding what she owes and what she earns that she explains to you sometimes with a clarity that is both impressive and devastating. "Morning," she says, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "Morning." She pours herself water from the kettle into a cup and stands there drinking it. Cold. It was colder yesterday. It'll be colder tomorrow. She sets down the cup. "You went out?" "Bread and candles." She nods. She looks like a person who is not quite here yet. Her eyes have the slightly unfocused quality of someone who was at work until 2 in the morning, who served 4 customers and drank enough Geneva to get through the evening, and now is doing the maintenance work of existing before she has to do it all again tonight. "The rosemary," she says. "Mevrouw Helena wants it burned in the rooms." Tell Mevrouw Helena it's the canals she smells, not the rooms. But Roos says this quietly, not loud enough to carry. You want to know what Roos's life looks like from the inside, because you spend every day working alongside it, and every night in the room above it, and you've thought about it more than you would like to admit. She earns more than you do. This is technically true in the sense that the women who work the upper rooms receive a portion of what their customers pay. A portion. The specifics of that portion are determined by Mevrouw Helena and written in a ledger, and are, to put it clearly, not generous. The room costs, the food costs, the wine and Geneva that you pour for the customers cost. The women are expected to drink with the men because men spend more when they drink, and the alcohol comes out of the women's accounts. The candles cost. The linen costs. There is also the matter of clothing. Mevrouw Helena has opinions about how her women dress when customers are present. These opinions are detailed and specific and tend toward silk and lace, neither of which is cheap. The clothing is provided in the sense that Mevrouw Helena buys it. It is paid for from the women's earnings. You have seen Roos's ledger once by accident. A page fell out when Mevrouw Helena was carrying it through the kitchen, and you caught it before it hit the floor and handed it back, but you saw enough in that second. The numbers on Roos's side of the page were smaller than they should have been after 3 years of work. The numbers on Mevrouw Helena's side were larger. This is the mathematics of this house. By noon, the salon on the first floor needs to be ready for the afternoon. You lay the fire. This takes 20 minutes. Paper, then small wood, then the larger pieces arranged so they will catch properly. So the fire will be going by the time the first customers arrive, and the room will be warm rather than merely warmish, which Mevrouw Helena considers an important distinction. You clean the grate, you sweep the floor, you dust the chairs, red velvet wearing thin, but the dust doesn't help. You restock the bottles from the supply cupboard. This is the part of the afternoon preparation you dislike most, not because of the lifting, which is merely heavy, but because it requires going down to the cellar. The cellar stairs go down behind a door in the back corridor, and the door has a way of swinging shut behind you if you don't prop it. And the cellar itself is dark and low-ceilinged, and smells of mould and old wine and the canal, which seeps through the walls when the water level is high. There is a lantern you take with you, and the light it throws is yellow and unsteady, and makes shadows move in ways that you know are rational, and find nevertheless unsettling. The bottles are in racks along the far wall. You count what's needed from the list. Geneva, mostly. This is the primary currency of the evening. Some Rhine wine for the customers who consider themselves above Geneva. One bottle of something Mevrouw Helena calls French, though you have heard Roos say it has probably never been within 100 miles of France. You load the bottles into the canvas bag you carry them in, one at a time, the glass cold and smooth against your palms. The bag gets heavy quickly. You hook it over your shoulder and climb the stairs with one hand on the wall, your shoulder burning with the weight. The door is propped. It stays open. This time. Here is something about Amsterdam in 1720 that I need you to understand, because it explains the room you're standing in, and the bottles you're carrying, and the women sleeping upstairs, and the debt in Mevrouw Helena's ledger. This city runs on sailors. Not just their labour, though there is that. The men who actually sail the ships, who climb the rigging in Atlantic storms and die of scurvy off the coast of Africa and drown when their ships go down in the Strait of Sunda. Not just their money, though there are enormous amounts of that, when they return after months at sea with 6 or 8 months of wages and no place to spend it, and no particular plan for the future. It runs on them in a deeper sense. The VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the Dutch East India Company, is the largest corporation in the world right now. Larger than any other company that has ever existed. It has its own army, its own navy, its own courts of law in the places where it operates, which are scattered across Asia and Africa, and the trade routes between them. It has 61 ships at sea right now, in January of 1720, each one carrying goods that will make their shareholders rich, and costing the men who sailed them things that can't be written in a ledger. The VOC has been operating for 120 years, and it has been sending young men out to sea in wooden ships, and not always bringing them back. And the ones it does bring back are different from when they left, and they come back to Amsterdam, which is their home and their origin, and which in some important ways does not know what to do with them. They come back sick sometimes, half-starved, carrying diseases from distant places. They come back with money they don't know how to manage, spent in a week on food and drink and the kind of company that doesn't ask too many questions about where you've been or what you saw. They come back with the sea still in their legs and the sea still in their heads, dreaming of open water in a city of narrow canals. A significant portion of them end up on Bloedstraat, or on Vermeerstraat, or on the Zeedik, which runs along what used to be the eastern edge of the city, and where the sea taverns are so thick you can hardly tell one building from the next. They are not all brutes. Most of them are not brutes. Most of them are young men who are tired and far from home and lonely in a way that they cannot articulate and would not articulate even if they could. But some of them are brutes, and you can't always tell which is which until the evening's underway. This is part of what Jan is for. Afternoon arrives grey and cold, and around 3 o'clock the first customers begin. You are behind the table with the bottles, which is your position in the evening, present but not primary, serving without being served, part of the furniture of the room in a way that makes you technically invisible. This is, in its way, a kind of protection. Mevrouw Helena is clear about the role of the mead in the salon. You pour, you carry, you do not sit, you do not engage in conversation beyond what is required. You're not a woman in the room, you are a function. The first customer today is a middle-aged man in a merchant's coat, a regular, who Mevrouw Helena greets by name in a tone that manages to be simultaneously warm and businesslike. He sits in the chair nearest the fire, the best chair which he always takes, which means no one else can have it, which must be some kind of arrangement between him and Mevrouw Helena, because no one else ever sits in it either. His name is Mynheer van den Berg, and he works in some capacity related to insurance at the Beurs, and he drinks Rhine wine, and he has a careful, watchful quality that makes him feel like someone who is always calculating the odds. Cold today, he says, taking the wine you pour him. Very cold, Mynheer. This is the extent of the interaction. He looks at you with the look that some men give you in this room, not aggressive, not particularly interested, just the automatic assessment of a man in a room where women are a commodity, quickly concluded, not the product, move on, you have learned to look through this, or you are learning to look through this. It is an ongoing project. By 5, the salon has 3 customers, and Roos and the other women are downstairs. Roos in the evening is different from Roos in the morning. She's put her hair up carefully, with one of the little pearl pins Mevrouw Helena makes available for evenings. Her dress is dark green silk, one of the provided garments for which she is paying, and her face has the composed, slightly remote expression of someone who is doing a job that requires a certain professional distance. The other women are Annabeth and Saskia. Annabeth is 21, from Groningen in the north, a tall, bony girl with red hair who's been here 8 months and who's not yet developed the professional distance, which means the evenings sometimes cost her more than they should. She has a habit of actually listening to what the customers say, which is a problem, Roos has explained to you once, because then you start caring how the story ends. Saskia is 32, which is the oldest of the working women in this house, and she is the one you understand least, because she is neither bitter nor resigned, nor particularly distressed. She is competent. She does her job the way Gerrit the baker does his job, with attention to quality and a clear understanding of the transaction. She's been doing this for 12 years at various establishments, and she appears to have made a peace with it that escapes explanation. More wine, Roos says to you, not loudly. You pour. There is music most evenings. A young man named Keys comes around 7, 3 evenings a week. He's maybe 20, slight, with ink on his fingers from some daytime work that involves a lot of writing, and he plays the violin with a quiet, focused skill that fills the room without overwhelming it. He plays dance tunes mostly, and French songs, and occasionally something you recognize from church that he has somehow transformed into something appropriate for a salon without ever quite ceasing to be the thing it originally was. He is paid a flat rate by Mevrouw Helena. He sits in the corner by the window and plays without speaking to anyone, and when he is done he packs his violin and goes home, and you have never had a conversation with him that lasted more than a few sentences. But the music changes the room. It fills the spaces between conversations. It gives the men somewhere to direct their attention when the conversation falters. It makes the room feel like a place rather than a transaction. This is the art of it. Mevrouw Helena has 22 years of understanding about how to make a room feel like a place where something good is happening. The fire, the wine, the light turned warm, the music, the women in silk, the sense of abundance and ease. The reality underneath that, the ledger, the debt, the cold stares, the things that happen in the upstairs rooms, is kept carefully out of sight. You pour the wine, you carry the Geneva, you keep your eyes on the work. Around 9, something happens that does not usually happen. A new customer, unknown to Jan, unknown to Mevrouw Helena, which means Jan is at the door before the man is fully inside. You can hear it from the salon, Jan's low voice asking the questions he asks. Who are you? Who sent you here? What are you looking for? These are not questions that require elaborate answers. They are screening questions. They are Jan reading a person. The man's voice comes through the door, louder than necessary, a voice that is either very confident or has been drinking for several hours, you can't tell immediately which. Jan lets him in. The man is maybe 35, dressed well but not carefully. His coat is good wool, but there's a stain on one cuff, and his wig sits slightly wrong, the way a wig sits when you've been wearing it for too long. He's a merchant, probably, or the subordinate of a merchant, someone with enough money to be here and not quite enough ease to wear it naturally. He scans the room in that way, the way men do when they've walked into a room they've been thinking about for a while. His eyes move from Roos to Annabeth to Saskia, then back to Roos. Roos does not change her expression, but she shifts slightly in her chair in a way that is technically imperceptible and completely legible to you after 4 months. The man sits down, takes the Geneva you bring him without looking at who is bringing it, and turns his full attention to Roos. You've thought a great deal in 4 months about what you think of what happens in this house. This surprises you somewhat. You expected to have an opinion formed in advance. Your mother has opinions about it, very clear ones, formed without ever having been within shouting distance of the thing. And you expected to arrive in this house and have those opinions confirmed. But the reality of it is more complicated than the opinion. Roos is not a victim. She would be annoyed at you for using the word, and she would explain, patiently, that she made a choice that was not a good choice, but was the best choice available to her at the time, and that she is managing the consequences of that choice with as much skill and intelligence as she can bring to bear. She is not happy, but she is not broken either. She is working a very difficult job with very few protections, and she is doing it with considerable competence. Annabeth might be a victim. There are evenings when you watch her face across the salon and see something there that should not be there. A kind of blankness that is not peace. A look in a way that is not detachment. Annabeth laughs too loudly at things that aren't that funny. Annabeth pours herself Geneva between customers in a way that Roos notices and says nothing about. Saskia is something you haven't managed to categorize yet, and Mevrouw Helena is both the cause of a great deal of difficulty and also, in a careful way, a kind of protection. The house on Bloedstraat is safer than some, cleaner than some. The women leave if they are sick and come back when they are well. Jan is competent. The debts are real, but they are not fictional. Mevrouw Helena's cruelty is systemic rather than personal, which does not make it less cruel but makes it more predictable. And predictability is a form of safety. You have been here 4 months and no one has hurt you. This is not guaranteed to continue. The evening deepens. More customers. The room fills up, not completely. This is not the busiest establishment in the city. It is not meant to be. But enough that the fire feels warm and the wine keeps flowing and Keys is playing something low and continuous from his corner. A melody that keeps circling back on itself like water in a drain. You pour. You carry. You are the function. At 10 o'clock, the man with the wrong-sitting wig, you've learned his name by now, it's Joris. He is from somewhere in North Holland and he is in Amsterdam for business involving grain futures. Joris is on his 3rd Geneva and getting louder. Not violent loud. Not yet. Just the loud that comes before any other kind of loud, where the self-monitoring has started to slip, and the voice has started to rise, and the sentences have started to lose their edges. You glance at Jan, who is at the door. Jan has already noticed. He has the air of someone who has noticed and is waiting. Mevrouw Helena appears from wherever she keeps herself during the evenings, her sitting room mostly, where she does her accounts and listens to the building around her the way a ship's captain listens to the sea. She moves through the room quietly, sits briefly near Joris and says something you don't hear. The volume comes down. Joris nods. Something understood between them, quick and efficient. And the implicit architecture of this house. Here is what is available. Here is what it costs. Here is how it proceeds. Here are the rules. Jan is at the door. Mevrouw Helena moves away. Roos stands up. They go upstairs. You pour wine for Vandenberg, who has not moved from the good chair. The Westerkerk bells mark 11. You know this bell. In 4 months you have learned the bells of Amsterdam the way you learn the bells of your home village, which took years. But Amsterdam teaches its bells faster, because they are everywhere, and they are loud, and they're not shy about making their presence known at all hours. The Westerkerk is the biggest. Rembrandt is buried there, the painter, the great one, whose house is not far from here and is now occupied by someone else, some cloth merchant, who has whitewashed over the marks on the walls. You only know this because Roos told you. Roos, who grew up knowing the names of painters in a way you did not. Rembrandt died 50 years ago and left behind so many paintings of Amsterdam that you could see this city twice, once in the world and once in the paint, and both versions would be true. The bell rings 11 times, then silence, then Keys packs his violin. Keys stopping is the signal that the evening is entering its later phase, where music stops and commerce becomes more direct, and the salon empties out as customers move upstairs or leave altogether. You begin the work of cleaning, collecting cups, wiping down the table, resetting the chairs that have been moved. This is the part of the evening where you become most invisible, which is useful. Vandenberg is still in his chair when Keys leaves. He watches you work. "You're the new girl," he says, not a question. "I've been here 4 months. New," he says again. His tone does not change. It is not threatening. It is merely the tone of a man observing a fact. "You're from Utrecht?" "Yes." "What brought you here?" He is not the first person to ask this question, and you have an answer that is short and true and tells him nothing that matters. "Work," you say. That's honest. He drinks his wine. Most girls say something more romantic. "I'm not particularly romantic." He seems to find this amusing. "No, you're not, are you?" He looks at you with slightly sharper attention for a moment. Helena doesn't have you working the rooms. I'm the maid. I know what you are. He sets down the wine cup. And I know what the debt looks like. I've been coming here long enough to know how it works. You continue wiping down the table. Your hands are steady. You should be careful, he says. It comes out neither warm nor cold. Just the assessment again. The debt has a way of becoming a different kind of debt in houses like this. You know this. You have known it since your second week when you understood clearly how Mevra Helena's ledger functioned. You do not need Vandenberg to tell you. Thank you, you say. He gets up, tips his wig slightly back onto his head and goes. Jan closes the door behind him. The salon is empty. I want to tell you something about Amsterdam in 1720 that will probably surprise you if your only image of this city is tulips and bicycles. Amsterdam in 1720 is one of the most medically dangerous cities in the world to be a young woman working in the kind of house you work in. Syphilis has been in Europe since the 1490s, and it has been in Amsterdam since the first sailors came back from the routes. It is everywhere in 1720. Absolutely everywhere. The doctors call it by different names in different countries. The French call it the Spanish disease. The Spanish call it the French disease. The Dutch are more practical about it and simply call it a specific variety of misery. The treatments for it in 1720 are, to be direct about it, worse than the disease in the short term, mercury, applied in various ways that I won't describe in detail, in a format meant to help you sleep. Let's just say that the cure makes your teeth fall out and your hair fall out, and gives you a mercury poisoning that in many cases kills you faster than the underlying disease would have. Mevra Helena has a doctor she calls for the women when they are sick. A thin man named Dr. Raidmaker who comes quietly and asks no questions, and charges more than he should for this discretion. He prescribes the mercury when he prescribes anything. Sometimes he prescribes rest and certain herbal preparations and a stern expression. Sometimes he prescribes nothing because there is nothing. The women know the risk. They have thought about it more carefully than they think about most things. Roos has a small box in her room with preparations in it that she has assembled over 3 years from various sources. A herbalist on the Jordan, a woman on the Zedek who seems to know things that are not officially taught. Whether any of it works is a matter of faith more than evidence. You know the risk. You're not working the upper rooms, but you are in this house, and the house is not separate from the risk. This is a thing you carry. You carry it quietly, in the back part of your mind, where you keep the things you need to know but cannot do anything about right now. You don't finish cleaning the salon until after midnight. The last thing you do is check the fire, bank it low enough to be safe overnight, high enough not to have to start from nothing in the morning. The ashes are hot under the surface, an orange glow in the grey-white pile when you disturb them with the poker. You bank it carefully, the way you've done it every night for 4 months. Your arms and hands are tired, the kind of tired that is not dramatic, that doesn't ask for sympathy, that is just the end of a day of physical work. You take the candle from the mantelpiece. The corridor is dark. Jan is at his post by the door, sitting now instead of standing, but awake. He nods at you. Night, you say. Night. The stairs. The attic room is cold, genuinely cold, the way only an attic room in a Dutch winter gets cold. The cold that comes through the roof tiles, through the gap around the window that you've stuffed with a piece of cloth that keeps shifting, through the floorboards from the slightly less cold floor below. Lisbeth is asleep. You can hear her breathing. You set the candle on the windowsill and undress quickly, which is easy because you don't take much off. Stockings stay on, apron comes off, your outer skirt, you keep the rest, you pull the blanket up. The candle flame bends in a draught that you can feel on your face. Through the small dirty window, through the frost on the glass, you can see a few stars, cold stars, blue-white in the black January sky above Amsterdam. The canal below is a dark shape. You have been here 4 months and 3 days, 12 guilders and 4 stuvers. You close your eyes. 3 weeks after your arrival in the middle of October, you go to the Westerkerk on a Sunday. Not because you are suddenly religious, though you were raised reformed in the Dutch fashion, which means church was serious and present throughout childhood, and has somewhat faded in the new circumstances. You go because you need to be somewhere that has nothing to do with Blodstraat, because you have been inside the house or on small errands from the house for 3 weeks, and the city has started to feel like a thing that only exists to contain your work. The Westerkerk is 10 minutes on foot, north and west along the canals past the Jordaan, the working-class district west of the main canal ring, where the tanners and the dyers work and the water runs colours that shouldn't exist in nature. The church is enormous. Red brick, white stone trim, the imperial crown of Amsterdam on top of the tower, because Amsterdam put its own crown on its church, because Amsterdam is that kind of city. The tower rises 85 metres into the grey sky. You know this because a boy selling printed guides at the entrance told you, adding as a selling point that it is the highest church tower in Amsterdam, which you believe because you can see it from almost everywhere in the city. Inside it is high-ceilinged and cold and full of light, which comes through large clear windows without the coloured glass of Catholic churches. Reformed churches do not do coloured glass. Reformed churches do plain light, which has its own quality, pale, flat, northern, the kind of light that reveals rather than beautifies. You sit in a pew near the back and listen to the sermon, which is long and in the Dutch that you understand mostly, though the preacher has a Rotterdam accent that makes some words come out differently than expected. The text is from the Psalms, something about refuge. You find it difficult to concentrate. The people around you are worshippers in the straightforward sense. Families, merchants, craftsmen, all in their Sunday clothes, all listening with the focused attention of people for whom this is the serious work of the week. You feel beside them like someone who has made a wrong turn and ended up in someone else's life. But the building does what you came for. It is large. It is solid. It is not the house on Blodstraat. The bells that shake your window at 5 every morning ring from this tower, and you are now inside the thing that makes that sound, which is a strange and oddly calming thought. You stay for the whole service. After the service, you walk north toward the harbour, where the city opens up and the water widens and the ships are. The harbour of Amsterdam in 1720 is one of the most extraordinary sights in the world. I am not being rhetorical. We are at or just past the peak of Dutch maritime power, but the harbour is still a forest of masts, still dozens of ships anchored or at the quays at any given moment, unloading their cargoes from Asia and Africa and the Americas and everywhere else, the VOC and the WIC reach, which is essentially everywhere. You come around the end of the Prince Hendrikade and the harbour opens in front of you and you stop. The ships are tall. You knew they were tall, but you have not been this close to them, and you had not understood what tall means for a sailing ship in 1720, which is 4-masted, the mainmast rising perhaps 40 metres above the waterline. the rigging a complex web of rope and yard and sail, all collapse now into a winter stillness, but showing the skeleton of what it becomes in the wind. The IJ, the body of water that Amsterdam faces, stretches north and east to the horizon. On clear days you can see across to the other side where North Holland is. Today it is hazy, and the far shore is a smear of grey-green at the edge of visibility. A ship is coming in. You can see it from here, maybe a mile out, moving slowly in the winter light, its sails partially furled. It's flying the VOC flag, the monogram in orange, white and blue, coming from somewhere, coming from very far away. Men are gathering on the quay to watch it come in. Dock workers, customs officials, merchants' representatives who will board it the moment it's moored to see what it's carrying. An agent with a ledger, already holding his pen. The ship moves with the patience of something that has been at sea for months. Its hull is dark with sea growth below the waterline. You can see the barnacled wood as it rises and falls gently with the small chop of the harbour. Its deck is busy with the tiny figures of sailors, moving in the coordinated way of people who know exactly what each of them is doing. They are coming home. Some of them left from this harbour 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago. They have been to Batavia, maybe, or Ceylon, or the Malabar coast. They have eaten biscuits with weevils in them, and watched their shipmates die and managed the particular claustrophobia of a wooden ship at sea for months. And now they are here. Amsterdam harbour. A man next to you, older, a merchant's agent by the look of him, watches the ship with an expression you can't quite read. VOC, you ask. Return cargo from Batavia. He's not looking at you, still watching the ship. Spices probably, some silk. They'll know more when the manifest comes off. A pause. If it's a full cargo, it'll make a few men very happy. If there's been loss at sea, it'll make a few men very unhappy. How can you tell? You can't. From here, all ships look the same. He says it flatly, the way someone says something that has stopped being interesting because it has been true their whole life. The ship comes in. You stand at the harbour for longer than you meant to. The arrival of the VOC ship, you learn its name later, the Zealandia, registered in Middelburg, 14 months out of Batavia, takes longer than you expect. The slow work of bringing a large ship to dock, involving a complicated choreography of small boats and ropes and shouted orders in Dutch and what might be Malay or Portuguese. The dock workers move with the efficiency of men who have done this 1,000 times. The customs officials wait with their ledgers. The sailors come off in ones and twos, carrying their sea chests and sea bags, and they look like something that has been through a lot. Thin, mostly. The particular thinness of men who have been eating ship's rations for over a year. Sun darkened even in January, the long months in southern latitudes burning something into the skin that Amsterdam winter does not bleach out. They walk carefully on the dock, the rolling gait of men whose bodies have learned to compensate for a moving deck and now have to relearn flat ground. Some of them are met. Wives, family, hands shaken, backs slapped. The careful Dutch expressiveness of reunion in a culture that considers excessive emotion somewhat impolite. Most of them are not met. They come off the ship alone, look around at Amsterdam as if confirming it still exists, and head for the taverns. You watch them go. You think about where they'll end up. The VOC sailors are the primary market for the establishments on Bloedstraat and Wermerstraat and the Zeedijk. They come off the ships with wages and spend it in days on food and drink and company, and then they're broke again, and then they sign on for another voyage, and then they leave for 14 months or 2 years or permanently. This is the cycle. This is what Amsterdam runs on. You feel something watching it. Not condemnation. Something more like a vast machinery running. Something larger than any of the individual parts. The sailors who arrive, the merchants who meet them, the dock workers who unload the cargo, the customs men who log it, the agents who negotiate it, the retailers who sell it, the women on Blurredstraat who will see those sailors before the week is out. All connected, all part of the same circulation of money and goods and bodies through this city, a small piece of it, moving with the current. When you get back to Blurredstraat that afternoon, Mevrouw Helena is sitting at the kitchen table. Not unusual. She does accounts at the kitchen table on Sunday afternoons. What is unusual is that she looks up when you come in. She usually doesn't. "Where did you go?" she asks. "The Westerkerk," you say, "and the harbour." "The harbour," she puts down her pen. Something in her expression shifts. Not quite softens, but adjusts slightly. "On foot?" "Yes." She looks at you for a moment in that way of hers. The complete assessment, quick and thorough. "My husband went to sea," she says, and then she goes back to her accounts. You stand in the kitchen doorway for a moment, with the cold still on you from the walk. This is the most personal thing Mevrouw Helena has ever said to you. You file it away. You go upstairs and take off your cloak and wash your hands and come back down to start preparing the evening. The weeks after the harbour walk pass with the rhythm of the house, which is relentless. Morning, fire, step, errands. Mid-morning, cleaning, supplies, preparation. Afternoon, the salon laid and ready. Evening, the pouring and carrying and watching. Night, the cleaning after, the cold stairs, the attic room. The cold deepens in February and then starts to break in March, and the breaking of the cold in Amsterdam is a whole event. Not a single warm day, but a gradual shift. The ice on the canals going grey and then pocked and then moving in plates and then gone, and the water returning to its brown-black flow, and the smell rising as the weather warms, and the city seeming to shake itself like a dog getting out of a bath. The herring are back. This is an event in Amsterdam. The arrival of the new season's herring, the Hollands Nieuwe, is marked with ceremony. The first barrel goes to the king, to the burgomaster, to various dignitaries. The rest go to everyone else, eaten raw with onions on a small piece of bread from one of the hundreds of herring stalls that spring up overnight all over the city. You eat one on a Tuesday afternoon in April, standing at a stall near the Newmarkt with your cloak over your work clothes, and it is cold and salty and exactly like the herring you ate in Utrecht at the spring market, and you are briefly so homesick it feels like a physical thing, like something pressing against your ribs from the inside. Then it passes, and you go back to work. In March, Annabeth gets sick. It starts as a cold, or it presents as a cold. The cough, the aching, the heaviness of a body fighting something. Mevrouw Helena sends for Dr. Raidmaker. He comes on a Thursday morning when you're cleaning the upstairs corridor, and you hear his voice through the wall of Annabeth's room. Low, considered, the particular tone of a doctor who's making a diagnosis he has made many times before. He stays for 20 minutes. He leaves without speaking to you. Mevrouw Helena appears in the corridor, and you are scrubbing the floor in the way that makes you very interested in the floor, which means you hear the next part of the conversation through a sort of pretended deafness. Annabeth's voice. How long? Mevrouw Helena's voice. Until you're well. And the debt while I'm not working. I'll be fair, a pause. I'm always fair, Mevrouw Helena says. And then she comes into the corridor and you become very interested in a spot near the baseboard. You know what Rademacher found. You don't know the specifics, and you're not going to know them, and you are going to continue the practice of not knowing them, because there is nothing you can do, and knowing does not help. But you scrub the floor with an extra attention that is really just your hands doing something, while your head does something else. Annabeth is sick for 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, she does not work. During those 6 weeks, her debt to Mevrouw Helena, which was already approximately what Roos's debt was after 3 years, though Annabeth has been here less than a year, increases by the amount of her room and her food and the medicines. When she comes back to work in April, she has the careful, hollow look of someone who has been through something and has not quite arrived at the other side of it yet. She does not talk about it. None of the women talk about it. Roos brings her extra bread at supper one night without comment. Saskia moves around her in the salon with a small practiced care. You pour her wine before she needs to ask. She looks at you, just looks. Not with gratitude exactly, not with anything you can name, just looks at you briefly. Thank you, she says. I want to stop for a moment and tell you something about the life of this house that isn't in the accounts, that isn't in Mevrouw Helena's ledger, that isn't measurable in guilders or stivers. There is a kind of life here. Not a life that anyone chose exactly, not a life that anyone would construct from scratch. But the women in this house, Roos and Annabeth and Saskia and Lidsbeth and you, have built something between them in the fabric of the days and nights. Something that is not friendship in the clean, uncomplicated version you had with girls in Utrecht, but is something, a knowledge of each other, a navigation of shared space. Roos knows that Annabeth should not be left alone with the Geneva after bad nights. Annabeth knows that Roos has a letter she rereads from someone in Zealand that she never talks about. Saskia keeps a small drawing of a child in the back of her wardrobe that you saw once and have never mentioned. Lidsbeth has a habit of humming at the wash basin in the morning, the same 3 notes, over and over, which used to irritate you and now is simply the sound of morning. And they know things about you, that you have a brother named Peter, that you keep tally marks on the wardrobe, that you went to the harbour on that October Sunday and came back with the cold sea air still in your hair. None of these are conversations that happened. They are things that accrued. This is what life in a house like this is, when it's not the thing people assume it is. It is people living together, closely, under difficult circumstances, and the small ways they manage that. May comes, and with it, something unexpected. A woman appears at the door in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Not a customer, she is dressed too carefully for this neighbourhood, in a good grey wool dress and a neat cap. She's perhaps 40, with an organised, brisk quality, and she carries a basket. Jan looks at her. She says something to Jan. Jan comes to find you, which is unusual. For Mevrouw Helena, he says. Some woman from the Reddingshuis. The Reddingshuis. The rescue house. You know what it is by name. A charitable institution, organised by a women's committee of the Reformed Church, which offers alternatives to women in exactly the kind of situation the women in this house are in. They offer positions, domestic work mostly, needlework, laundry, places to stay while positions are found. They come to houses like this sometimes, Roos has told you. They come with their baskets and their organised manner, and they speak to the women and offer options. Mevrouw Helena usually politely declines, because the Reddings-Hughes is good at offering positions and not good at managing the accounting question of what the women owe before they can leave. You bring the woman to Mevrouw Helena's sitting room. Mevrouw Helena receives her with perfect courtesy. You bring coffee, real coffee, the kind Mevrouw Helena keeps for occasions when she needs to signal that she is a respectable businesswoman receiving a guest. The door closes. You stand in the corridor for a moment. Then you go back to work. You don't know what was said in the sitting room. That evening, Roos comes to find you in the kitchen while you're preparing the evening. The woman from the Reddingshuis, Roos says, without preamble. What about her? She left cards. Roos puts a small piece of paper on the table. With an address. You look at the card. A name, a street address, an instruction about hours. She left one for everyone, you ask. For the women who were here. A pause. She asked about you, whether you were one of us. What did Mevrouw Helena say? That you were the maid. You pick up the card, turn it over in your hands. The paper is thick and well cut. I could go, you say. It comes out more quietly than you meant it to. Roos looks at you for a long moment. She's not unkind in this moment. She's something more useful than kind. She's clear. You could try to go, she says. Your debt is not as bad as some. You've been here 4 months. If you went to the Reddingshuis, they would probably take you in. And Mevrouw Helena would be unhappy. A pause. But she wouldn't. You stop. No, Roos says. She wouldn't. She's not that kind of unhappy. Another pause. But she would make the process of your leaving difficult. Because that is how this works. Because she always makes it difficult. You stand there with the card in your hand. What would you do, you ask? Roos looks at the card, then at you. I would have left 2 years ago, she says, but I kept thinking there was never quite the right moment. She goes back to the salon. You put the card in the back of the wardrobe behind the tally marks. You do not go to the Reddingshuis, not yet, not in May. There are reasons for this that you examine in the attic room at night, when the city is quieter and you have the space to think. The debt is real. 12 guilders, 4 stuvers, plus additions since you arrived. The arithmetic of leaving is not simple. The Reddingshuis offers domestic positions, laundry mostly for the poorest establishments, perhaps kitchen work. The difference between washing someone's laundry and washing Mevrouw Helena's floors is not, in practical terms, enormous. And there is something else, something you don't say out loud even to yourself. The women here know you. Roos knows you. Even the relationship with Mevrouw Helena, difficult as it is a known quantity. The house on Bloedstraat is not home exactly, but it has the texture of a known place. The city outside is large. This is not a good reason to stay. You know it is not a good reason to stay. You add it to the list of things you are carrying. Summer arrives in Amsterdam like a drunk man, loudly, without warning, and then extremely present. The canal smell, which you thought you'd become accustomed to, you have not. Summer shows you the true extent of the canal smell, which is a different order of magnitude from winter. The city sits on approximately 90 islands connected by more than 100 canals, and in summer those canals are warm and still, and full of everything the city has been throwing into them for 6 centuries. You buy a small bunch of dried lavender at the Newmarkt for 3 stuvers and keep it in your apron pocket and smell it approximately every 20 minutes throughout the day. This helps somewhat. The heat makes the upper rooms more difficult. You change the linen more often. You haul more water. You are always hauling water, summer or winter, but summer doubles it. But summer also brings the long light. The days in Amsterdam in summer are very long. The city is far enough north that in June the sky is light until 10 at night, and the evenings have a quality of extended suspension, a golden hour that lasts for hours, the canals reflecting back a sky that goes from blue to pink to a long amber that makes the step gables of the canal houses glow. You see this from the window of the attic room sometimes, when there is time before the evening starts, when the work of the afternoon is done and the evening has not yet begun. You push the window open, the frost is months away, and lean out, and there it is. The city, in the long light, the canal below, the reflections moving, boats, voices from somewhere, a smell of food cooking from the building across the way. You're 17, then 18, then still 18. The days continue. There is a night in July that I need to tell you about. It is hot. The kind of hot that Amsterdam almost never reaches, but sometimes, a few nights in summer, catches up with. The heat that has been stored in the bricks all day, releasing back into the rooms after dark, making the building warm in a way that has nothing to do with fires. The windows are open. The canal smells of itself. There are more customers than usual. Something in the heat, some combination of the long light and the warm nights and the sailors in port between voyages, has filled the houses on Bloedstraat and the neighbouring streets with a density that feels different from ordinary evenings. The salon is full. Keys is playing something fast. The wine is flowing. You're behind the table, pouring, moving, carrying invisible. And then one of the men, a sailor, young, maybe 20, with the tan and the walk and the VOC smell of distant salt on him. This man gets hold of your wrist as you reach across him to collect an empty cup. Not aggressive. Not yet. He is drunk and his grip is incautious rather than deliberate, and his face, when he turns it to you, is not threatening. He is just a young man who's been at sea for 11 months and is quite drunk and has, for a moment, grabbed the wrong person. Let go, you say. He blinks, you say it again. Let go. You do not shout. You do not make it a scene. This is something you've learned from 4 months of watching Mevrouw Helena manage the room. The quiet voice is more effective than the loud one in the right circumstances. He lets go. Jan is at your shoulder before the man has fully registered what happened. Not touching the sailor, not yet. Just there, the large presence, the broken nose, the arm that belongs to someone larger than Jan. No, Jan says. He says it with nothing else. Just no. The sailor looks at him, looks at you, looks at Jan again. Sorry, he says. He sounds genuinely surprised by his own behaviour. He turns back to his company. Jan looks at you. You nod. He goes back to the door. You pick up the empty cup. Your hand is shaking. You notice this, and you go to the kitchen with the cup and you stand there for a moment in the relative quiet, away from the noise of the salon, and you wait for your hands to stop shaking. They stop. You go back in. Afterward, late when the salon is empty and you're cleaning again, Roos finds you. Jan told me, she says. It was nothing. It was something. She sits down in Vandenberg's chair, the good chair, the one she never sits in during the evenings. Are you all right? Yes. You're shaking. I've stopped shaking. She looks at you. Then she does something unexpected. She pours 2 cups of Geneva from the bottle on the table, sets one in front of you. Sit down. You sit. The Geneva is raw, not the good kind, the rough, sharp, cheap kind that Mevrouw Helena keeps for the customers who don't know the difference. It burns going down and sits in your stomach like a small fire. The first time is always the worst, Roos says. It wasn't. He didn't. I know. The first time it isn't anything either. Just someone grabbing your wrist. and then you spend an hour shaking. She looks at her cup. The second time is easier. The 10th time you don't notice. You don't say anything. I don't know if that's a good thing, Rue sees. I stopped being able to decide. The candle on the mantelpiece burns low. Outside, the canal moves slowly in the summer night. My mother thinks I work in a weaving house, you say. This comes out without planning. I know. Ruse looks at you. What do you write in your letters? That the work is difficult, that the city is interesting, that I am saving money. That last part is, I know. You look at the Geneva. I know it's not true. Ruse is quiet for a moment. What will you do? She asks. You think about the card in the wardrobe, the address on it. I don't know yet, you say, but I'm going to do something. The something happens in September. It doesn't happen all at once. Nothing in Amsterdam happens all at once. Everything is gradual, the accumulation of small facts, small decisions, small moments that add up to a direction. In September you go back to the Westerkerk on a Sunday, because you have been going every few weeks since that first October visit, because it is the thing that is yours, the thing that belongs only to you and not to the house on Blödstraat. After the service you walk north as you often do, but this time you stop at the address on the card. The Reddingshuis is on a quiet street in the Jordaan, a wide house, well maintained, with a small garden visible through the iron gate, a brass plate on the door with the name. You stand outside for 5 minutes. You go in. The woman who receives you is not the same woman who came to Blödstraat in May. This one is younger, in her 30s, with a calm, practical manner that reminds you slightly of Mevrouw Helena. And then you realise, reminds you of Mevrouw Helena in a way that is somehow positive, which is not what you expected. Her name is Mevrouw de Groot. She does not ask why you are there. She already knows, in the way that people who do this work already know. She asks about your situation, carefully, without judgment, the questions that establish the practical facts. You tell her about the debt. 12 guilders, 4 stuvers, plus additions. It has grown over the months to 15 guilders and 2 stuvers, which is worse, and also not as bad as you feared. She writes this down. And you are not working the upper rooms? No. And you have been there nearly 11 months. She writes this down too, and then she looks up. We can help with the debt, she says. We have a fund. We can settle the debt with Mevrouw Helena, and you would owe us, which is different. How is it different? She meets your eyes. Because we do not add to the debt while you are here. Because there is no Jan at the door. Because you can leave when you have repaid us. You look at her, at the room, at the garden visible through the window, with the last of the September light on it. What kind of work? We have a position in a linen draper's household. Domestic work. Honest. Boring. I'll take it, you say. Leaving Blödstraat takes 3 more weeks. Not because you change your mind. Because leaving requires the negotiation you knew it would require. The interview with Mevrouw Helena in the sitting room that smells of tobacco and lavender. The ledger opened, the numbers discussed. Mevrouw Helena receives you with the courtesy she brings to everything. She does not rage. She does not accuse. She sits across from you with the ledger between you, and she looks at the numbers and she says, with an expression that is completely unreadable, the Reddingshuis. Yes. They're settling the debt? Yes. She closes the ledger. You're prepared for a long argument. You've rehearsed it, lying in the attic room in the night since the Reddingshuis visit. going through every variation of what she might say, every obstacle she might raise. She doesn't raise any of them. Your last day is Friday, she says. Help with the evening preparation before you go, and strip the linen from your room. You stare at her. Was there something else? She asks. No, thank you. She nods. The conversation is over. You're in the corridor before you realize you're shaking. Not from fear this time, but from the release of anticipated fear, which is its own kind of shake. On Thursday night, the night before you leave, Ruth finds you in the attic room. She does not knock. She sits on the edge of the bed in the way she does sometimes, the way that means this is a conversation that needs to happen before it can happen. You are packing. You do not have much. The clothes on the pegs, the letter from your mother, the tally marks in the back of the wardrobe that you run your fingers over. 4 months, then 5, then 6, then the months blurring as you lost the count and kept it only loosely. 11 months and some days. I should have given you the address sooner, Ruth says. You gave it to me when you could. I should have left 2 years ago, she says. It comes out quiet, flat, the way things come out when you've said them to yourself many times and the emotion has worn off. You sit down beside her. Come to, you say. You have thought about this, whether to say it, and you've decided to say it because it needs to be said and because leaving without saying it would be a different kind of cowardice. Ruth is quiet for a moment. My debt is different, she says. The Reddingsuisse. My debt is different, she says again. Not to end the conversation, just to be clear. You sit there together in the attic room the last evening, the canal sounds coming up through the small window, the city continuing, the bells of the Westerkirk somewhere in the not-too-far distance. You'll be all right, Ruth says. The linen drapers, it's honest work. Dull work. Good, she stands up. Dull is? She stops. Dull is underrated. She goes back downstairs. Friday morning. Last time stripping the linen from your bed. Last time carrying the basin to the window to dump the water. Last time folding the blanket and leaving it at the foot of the mattress, which smells of Lisbeth and cold air and 11 months of your life. Lisbeth was up before you. She's always up before you. She nodded at you this morning with the expression that is the most you ever get from Lisbeth, and you have decided it counts. The tally marks in the wardrobe. You didn't count them this morning. They are there and you are leaving them there, which feels right. Someone else will sleep in this room. They will open the wardrobe and see the marks and maybe count them and wonder who made them, and maybe that will mean something and maybe it won't. Your bundle is small. Everything you arrived with, plus a few things you bought with what little Mevru Helena, allowed you to keep from the errands over 11 months. A better pair of stockings, a winter cap, a copy of a psalm book that you bought at a second-hand stall on the Newmarket for 2 stuvers, and which has someone else's name written in the front page in a hand you don't recognise. You carry the bundle downstairs. Mevra Helena is in the kitchen when you come down. She's eating her bread with her usual concentrated attention. Jan is at the door. You stop in the kitchen doorway. Mevru, go, she says. She doesn't look up. Go and do well somewhere. You stand there for a moment. Thank you, you say. You mean it, which is complicated. She picks up her bread. You go. The streets in the morning. Amsterdam in September, early, a clear day after the September rains. The canals higher than in summer. The light different, sharper. The kind of light that says winter is organising itself somewhere to the north, but has not arrived yet. The air is cold enough to see your breath, and clean enough that the canal smell has receded to a background note, manageable. You walk south, toward the Jordan, toward the Reddingshuis. The city is doing what it always does. The herring stalls, open. The bakers, open. Boats on the canals. Voices. Someone arguing. Someone laughing. The church bells. From multiple directions, because Amsterdam always has more than one thing to say. You cross the bridge over the Prinsengracht and you stop for a moment, because from this bridge you can see a long stretch of the canal in both directions. The buildings on both sides reflected in the moving water, the light on the step gables of the houses making them look for a moment like something out of a painting, which they are in a way, which they have been for a century. All the painters who lived and worked in this city, Rembrandt, Vermeer, de Hooch, the ones you know by name because Roos talked about them, and the dozens more you don't know, they painted these canals, these buildings, this exact quality of morning light on water. This image exists in oil paint on canvas in 100 places. The wealthy houses of the canal ring, and the collections of far-off royalties, and the walls of merchants' dining rooms in Amsterdam itself. You are standing inside a painting that has already been painted. You stand on the bridge for exactly as long as you can stand it. Then you pick up your bundle and walk on. At the Reddingshuis, Mevrouw de Groot has the paperwork ready. The debt settled with Mevrouw Helena. The position arranged, a linen draper's household in the canal ring, the southern end near the Keizersgracht, a large house, a family, 3 servants. You would be the least senior of them. It's a start, Mevrouw de Groot says. Yes, you say, it's a start. She pours coffee, real coffee. It is dark and hot and tastes of a different kind of morning. I want to stay with you in this moment for a while before we move on. You're 18 years old, sitting in the Reddingshuis with a cup of coffee with a bundle on the floor beside you, in Amsterdam, in September of 1720. You've been in this city for 11 months, and you've learned things that you did not expect to learn, and you're leaving a situation that was not the situation you came here to find. And you are heading toward a situation that is not exciting, and may be dull, and may be exactly what you need. You have not become the thing you were afraid you might become. This required attention, and some luck, and the help of a small card from a charitable organisation, and a woman named Roos, who you will probably not see again. You carry this as something that is not quite gratitude and not quite survivor's guilt, and is mostly just a weight that you will carry for a while, and then slowly put down, and then pick up again sometimes without warning. Outside the window of the Reddingshuis, Amsterdam continues. Ships in the harbour, the VOC flag over the warehouses, the herring stalls and the Geneva shops and the canal houses and the printers, and the merchants and the surgeons in the Wag Tower, and the painters who went out early to catch the morning light on the water. All of it continuing, all of it the same city you arrived in 11 months ago, which is also completely different from that city, because you are different, and cities are, in the end, what you know of them. The house on the Keizersgracht is everything Mevrouw de Groot said and very little she didn't. Large, clean, the particular cleanliness of a house where cleanliness is enforced by people who consider it a moral quality. The housekeeper, a woman named Cartier, 50, originally from the south of the country, runs the domestic operations with an efficiency that makes Mevrouw Helena look chaotic, though the comparison is unfair in several directions. You are the junior servant. You sleep in a real room, small, under the eaves again, but a room of your own, with a door that closes and a window that looks north toward the harbour. On clear nights, very late, you can sometimes see the lanterns of ships at anchor in the IJ. The work is laundry, mostly, hauling water, which you are already good at, washing and mangling and hanging the incredible quantity of linen that a prosperous Dutch household generates, kitchen work when Katia needs you, the things that need doing. It is dull. Ruse was right. It is exactly as dull as advertised. The negotiations are over a bunch of dried rosemary rather than guilders. The dangers are a mangling machine and the stares when the laundry basket is full rather than men with careless hands. Nobody grabs your wrist. This is, in its quiet way, a thing. The family is called Van Loonen. Cornelis Van Loonen is a merchant, 62, retired mostly from the active work of commerce, and now living on investments and the income from ships he partly owns. He is a spare, courteous man who moves through his own house, with the slight uncertainty of someone who has spent most of his life in other places. His wife Elizabeth is 55 and is the actual manager of the household. She communicates with Cartier. She rarely communicates directly with you, which is as it should be at your position in the hierarchy. On the one occasion when she has spoken to you directly, about a piece of linen that you folded incorrectly, which is a very specific and also correct complaint, she was precise and not unkind. Their son Harmon is 28 and works at the Beurs and comes home at odd hours and has twice nearly knocked over your laundry basket in the corridor, and apologised both times with the slightly distracted courtesy of a man who is mostly somewhere else in his head. You know their clothes before you know their faces because you wash their clothes before you learn their names, which is a thing about domestic service that stays with you. The fall passes. October is grey and cold, and the city bends back into the winter cycle you know now. The tightening of the days, the canals darkening, the smell of coal smoke settling over the city as every building lights its fires. You get a letter from your mother in October. She asks if you are well and whether you have saved money and whether you're coming home at the winter feast. You write back that you are well, that you're working in a merchant household, that you're saving money. This is all true. You do not mention the 11 months at Bloedstraat. You do not know yet if you will mention it ever to her. You put the question aside in the part of your mind where you put things that require more time. Your brother Peter, your mother writes, is learning to read. He is very good at it. He already reads better than his teacher. You sit with this for a long time. In November, on a Sunday, you go back to the Westerkerk. Habit. By now. The walk, the bells, the pale light through the clear windows, the predictable sermon. Afterward, you walk north toward the harbour. This Sunday is clear and cold, and the harbour is calling in the way it sometimes calls. The IJ in November is choppy. The wind off the water cuts through your cloak and the linen scarf you've wound around your neck twice. You stand on the Prins Hendrikaer and watch the ships. A VOC ship is being fitted out. You can see the work from here. The men going up and down the rigging, the carts bringing supplies up the gangway, the careful, organised labour of preparing a ship for a long voyage. She's a new ship, or recently overhauled. Her hull is clean, the paint fresh, the brass fittings on her bow catching the weak November light. She will leave in January probably, February at the latest. She will sail south down the Atlantic, around the Cape of Good Hope, east across the Indian Ocean to Batavia or Ceylon or somewhere further. She'll be at sea for 6 months in each direction, roughly. Some of the men fitting her out will not come back. This is not something anyone says aloud on the quay. It is a thing that everyone knows in the background of the work, the way you know a lot of things in the background of your work. You watch the fitting out for a while, then you turn back toward the city. And here, On this walk back from the harbour, I want to give you something that Amsterdam in 1720 is thinking about very carefully, because it is also what you are thinking about, in your way. The question of what you are. Amsterdam in 1720 is a city of categories. There are categories for everything. Guilds, religions, nations, social ranks, legal statuses. The categories are the infrastructure of the city the way the canals are the infrastructure. They determine where you can live and what you can do, and who you can marry and whether your children will have the same options you had. You are a reformed Dutch girl from Utrecht, which puts you in a fairly favourable category. Not wealthy, but legitimate Protestant Dutch. You're a domestic servant, which is not a high category, but is a respectable one. You're female and unmarried, which limits your options in ways that have been bothering you since you were old enough to notice them. And you spent 11 months in a house on Bloedstraat, which is a category that has no official name, but that would immediately close certain other categories to you if anyone who mattered knew about it. This is the geography of your life in Amsterdam, the visible and the invisible categories, the ones you carry openly and the ones you carry tucked away, the way you carry the card from the Reddingshuis even though you don't need it anymore, in the inside pocket of your cloak because you haven't gotten around to throwing it away. The city does not know everything you are. It knows what you present it with. You are learning that this is true, and it is both a relief and, in ways that are harder to articulate, a kind of loneliness, winter, the second winter. You're first at the Van Lunen house, you're second in Amsterdam, which means you know it differently from how you knew the first, not as something threatening and overwhelming, but as something you are part of, a city that has your rhythms and your roots, and the places you go on Sundays, and the exact sound of the Westerkerk bells at 5 a.m, which you still hear even from the Keizersgracht, slightly fainter, slightly different angle, but still yours. The ice comes in December, not as hard a freeze as some years, Katja says. She's been in Amsterdam 30 years. She has seen the frost fairs of 1683 and 1684, when the ice was thick enough to roast an ox on the IJ. This winter the canals freeze and the Keizersgracht has ice thick enough to walk on, and children do walk on it, and occasionally an adult does, and Katja shakes her head and says nothing. You haul water from the pump in the morning, and the water in the bucket has a thin skin of ice by the time you get it back to the kitchen, and your hands are red and your knuckles crack in the cold, and you rub tallow into them at night and they crack again in the morning. This is winter. It is ordinary. It is yours. In February you receive a letter, not from your mother, from Roos. The handwriting is careful, a little slow. She taught herself to write. She told you once, out of a book she bought at a second-hand stall because knowing how to write meant something she didn't want to be without. The letter is short. She is well. She has saved enough finally to settle a portion of the debt. Not all, but enough to reduce it to something that is no longer permanent. Mevrouw Helena has accepted. There are options being discussed that Roos does not specify. She hopes you are well. She heard, through someone she does not name, that you are at a merchant's house on the canal ring. She's glad. She does not ask you to write back, but she signs it. Roos, just Roos, no other name. You write back 2 pages. You tell her about the laundry and Katja and the Van Lunens and the harbour, and the ship being fitted out in November. You tell her about the second winter and the Westerkerk and the psalm book you bought at the Newmark that still has someone else's name in the front. You tell her that dull is better than she knows. You seal the letter. You address it to the house on Bloedstraat, which is the only address you have for her. You send it. March again. The ice breaks. The canal smell rises. The herring stalls come back. You eat one on a Thursday afternoon, standing at the stall near the Newmarket, cold and salty, and the homesickness comes again, brief and sharp, and then it passes, and you walk back to the Keizersgracht, and you are home. Not Utrecht, not Bloedstraat. The Keizersgracht, the canal, Amsterdam. The Westerkerk bells at 5, the harbour on Sundays. The tally marks you stopped keeping because there's no longer a reason to count the days. This is what it means to belong somewhere. Not to love it without complication, not to have no complaints, not to have arrived at the end of difficulty. It means you stop counting how long you've been there. It means the city stopped being a thing that was happening to you and started being a thing you were happening to. You're 18 years old. You have been in Amsterdam for 16 months. You are a domestic servant, a reformed Dutch girl from Utrecht, a daughter, a sister to a boy named Peter who reads better than his teacher, a former maid at a house on Bloedstraat, which is something you carry without shame now mostly, the mostly still requiring attention, still requiring the occasional Sunday in the Westerkerk with the pale light on the clear windows, and the long sermon in the Rotterdam accent you've come to find comforting in its foreignness. Evening, Sunday, the Keizersgracht. You're in your room, the small room under the eaves. The window is cracked open because March in Amsterdam, when the freeze breaks, has a smell that requires ventilation. The canal releasing all the winter, the city opening up, something that is not quite pleasant and not quite unpleasant and is, above all, real. You have the psalm book on your knee, the one you bought for 2 stevers with the stranger's name in the front. You have been reading it most Sundays, not because you have become more devout exactly, but because it is yours, because you bought it yourself, and reading it is a thing that is only yours. The candle on the windowsill is burning low. Outside, Amsterdam is doing what Amsterdam does on Sunday evenings. The city that never fully rests still at its quietest. The canal sounds muffled, a distant fiddle from somewhere, because there is always a fiddle from somewhere. The church bells marking the hour with their overlapping voices. You think about Roos. You think about the Reddingswest card in the inside pocket of your cloak. You should throw it away. You keep not throwing it away. Maybe you keep it because it reminds you that there are things you can do when the time is right. Maybe you keep it because it is the weight of a decision, and carrying it means you have decided and will not need to decide again. You think about the ship you watched being fitted out in November. She will be at sea now, somewhere in the Atlantic, working south, a tiny wooden thing in an immense dark water. You think about Peter, who reads better than his teacher, in a village near Utrecht where you grew up, where you will go back someday, though someday is a long way off and the shape of that visit is not yet clear. You think about all of it briefly, without trying to resolve it. There is nothing to resolve tonight. Tonight there is just the candle and the psalm book and the canal outside and the city that took 11 months to become home. Let me tell you about sleep in Amsterdam in 1720. Sleep in this city is not a private thing. It is not the modern experience of a single person in a separate room with a door that locks and light that can be completely excluded. Even here, in your room at the Van Lunen house, you can hear the building around you. Kaya 2 rooms over, shifting in her bed. The creak of the house settling in the cold. The canal. The distant bells. In the house on Bloedstraat, sleep was Lisbeth's breathing, and Roos coming up the stairs at 2 a.m. and the sound of the canal directly below. It was a collective thing, all of you present in the dark, in the breathing house, in the city that doesn't stop. Here it is quieter, but Amsterdam is still there. It is always there. Outside, the canal moves. The Kaisersgracht, Canal of the Emperors, built in the early 1600s as part of the great expansion of Amsterdam, the canal ring that made this city into the thing it was and still is, 3 concentric arcs of water curving around the medieval centre, lined with the houses of the merchants who made themselves rich enough to build them. You live on one of these canals now. Not in one of the great houses, not in the canal house proper with its stepped gable and its painted interior and its portrait of some dead merchant's wife in the entrance hall. You're in the service rooms, the attic, the part of the house that the canal ring architecture almost forgets to mention. But you are on the canal. The water reflects what light there is. March, late. The moon is up somewhere behind the clouds. You can see the diffuse glow of it. The sky not quite dark. The ice is gone from the canal. The surface moves. It has been here for over 100 years, this canal. It'll be here for hundreds more. The city of Amsterdam will change enormously. The ships will become steamships and then something else. The buildings will change and the language will change and the canal houses will become museums and apartments and offices. But the canal will be here. And people will stand at the edge of it at 5 in the morning or late on a Sunday night and look at the water and feel the particular feeling that moving water near a city produces. Something between restlessness and peace. Something that says, this is larger than you, and you are part of it. You have been part of it for 16 months. The candle gutters, low now, the last half-inch of tallow, doing what it can. You close the psalm book. Set it on the small shelf above the bed, next to the letter from your mother and the letter from Roos and the 2 stuver coin you've kept since the day you bought the book, for no reason you can name except that it was the first thing you bought for yourself in Amsterdam that was not necessary, and it felt like something. You lie down. The blanket is warm. You have a better blanket now than the thin one in the attic room on Bloedstraat. This one is wool, heavy, with the particular warm smell of wool that has been used for years that holds heat without being asked. The candle goes out. The room is dark in the way a room is dark when the candle goes out. Not suddenly, but gradually, your eyes adjusting until the grey shape of the window becomes visible, and the lighter grey of the curtain and the faint line of the canal light under the edge of the shutter. Tomorrow is Monday. The laundry waits. The linens of the Van Lunen household, shirts and shifts and tablecloths and all the rest, washed and mangled and hung and folded in the exact order that Katja requires. The water from the pump cold, your hands in the wash trough, the lye soap, the weight of wet fabric, the bells at 5, the bread and the chicory in the kitchen before anyone else is properly awake. Katja's voice from somewhere, giving instructions for the day. The city outside, already beginning. The boats on the canal, the herring stalls, the burrs opening, the merchants in their tall houses doing the commerce that made this city what it is, and will keep it running until something better comes along. All of it waiting for morning. But that is morning. That is not now. Now is the dark room and the slow breathing of the house, and the canal outside, and you are warm enough, and fed enough, and safe enough. You have what you need. You are here. The nights in Amsterdam have a quality that the days don't have. A weight of time, of all the nights that have happened here before this one, in this canal, in this city. The merchants who built these houses in the 1600s slept in rooms not far from where you are lying. The painters who painted the morning light on these canals came home at night to sleep in houses in these streets. Rembrandt, who is buried in the Westerkerk 2 streets west, who died poor because he spent his money on art and curiosity and people he loved. He lay awake in Amsterdam at night and watched the light change on the water and painted what he saw. All of them sleeping and waking and sleeping again, the city carrying them through their years the way the canal carries its boats, forward steadily, without particular care for the individual journey. You are part of this now. You are another person the city is carrying. The clouds shift. Through the window a piece of sky appears that is clearer than the rest. A gap, briefly, and through it you can see 2 or 3 stars. Not many. Amsterdam in spring doesn't often give you clear sky. The air is too thick with everything the city makes. But tonight, briefly, 2 or 3 stars. Cold light, blue-white, very far away. They have been there while ships crossed to the other side of the world, while surgeons learned things in the Wag Tower, while merchants built their houses on the canal ring, and women washed their linen, and Jan stood at the door, and Keys played his violin in the corner, and the Westerkirk bells rang the city awake at 5 every morning. They will still be there after Amsterdam becomes something different, and then something different again. Some things are that large, and some things are this small. A room, a canal, a girl who came from Utrecht with nothing, and has, in 16 months, built a life that is hers. Let it come. Let the sleep that waits at the end of a day of hauling and washing and mangling and walking and thinking and carrying the things you carry, let it come. Let the canal sounds fade. Let the city quiet. Let the 5 o'clock bells wait their turn. You are warm enough. You have done enough. The debt is paid. The tally marks are in a wardrobe on Bloodstraat that will outlast you and everyone who slept in that room. And the marks will fade, or the wardrobe will be sold at some point to someone who will use it for something else, and the marks will stop mattering, as all tally marks stop mattering eventually, when the thing being counted is over. Yours is over. What comes next doesn't have marks yet. What comes next is unmarked, which is a different thing from empty. Tomorrow the ships will move on the harbour. The VOC will send another vessel south, laden with hope and gunpowder and the particular confidence of a trading empire at its height, not knowing yet how much of what it has built will come to grief, or how long it still has, which is a thing true of all empires and also of individual people. We carry on with the full weight of our investment in the future, not knowing what comes, and this is both the best thing about us and the most precarious. Tomorrow the herring stalls will open, the bread will be bought, and the chicory will be set to boil, and somewhere on Bloodstraat someone will be scrubbing the front step in the cold before the city wakes. But none of that is now. Now is this room, this canal, this moment. You have been in Amsterdam long enough that the city has become the sound of home. The bells are home. The canal is home. Even the smell, which you have thought about extensively, which is genuinely terrible, and which you have memorized in spite of yourself, is home in the way that the bad smells of home are home. This is what belonging to a place means, finally. Not that it's perfect. Not that it's chosen freely. Just that it's yours. Sleep is a canal. It moves in one direction. Let it carry you. Let the sound of Amsterdam be the last thing. The distant water, the occasional bell, the movement of the city that never fully stops and never needs to, because Amsterdam does not need your attention to continue. Amsterdam has been doing this for centuries without any particular passenger's help. You're not carrying it tonight. It's carrying you. And somewhere out there, beyond the canal ring, beyond the harbour, beyond the IJ and the North Sea and the Atlantic, The world that Amsterdam trades with is also sleeping. Sailors on ships in dark water, spice farmers on islands you've never heard of, merchants in cities whose names you've only seen on maps at the back of psalm books, all of them moving, all of them part of the same enormous turning of things. And here, in a room on the Keizersgracht, a girl from Utrecht who came here with nothing is warm and quiet. And finally, after 16 months and some days at rest, the canal moves. The stars move slowly overhead, through clouds, through the April sky of Amsterdam that smells of spring and the sea. The bells of the Westerkerk count the hours. The city breathes, and you with it, and you with it. Good night.